ethnic conflict. And the suicide is, actually I have written this paper because I want to go beyond my comfort zone. Right? So for me, it's just a literature review, though, to write a paper on suicide, I think we need to be very factual also. Only theoretical explanation cannot be enough. By the way, the title of my paper is Understanding Suicide in India, the Role of Society and Culture. The suicide is an act of self-inflicted and self-intention death. So it is not a disease, though many things. It is not biological anomaly, though it may contribute it. It is not immoral, though it often be treated. It is not a crime, though for countries, for centuries, many did. So to World Health Organization, more people die by suicide than by other forms of death. And suicide affects immediately 8 to 10 people besides suicide. And that's the importance of why there is a need to study suicide. In the perspective of Western world, suicide is a conscious act of self-induced annihilation, best understood as multi-dimensional malaise in a needful individual who defines an issue for the suicide is perceived as the best solution. Though it is a best solution, yet suicide cannot be prescribed. Even Aristotle was against it. For Aristotle, suicide was an act against the state, therefore a forbidden action. Humankind is answerable for suicide to the state. To die, to escape from poverty or law or anything painful is not the mark of a brave man, but rather a coward. In India, the Dharma-shastra also condemns suicide. A person who attempts suicide should be fined. If a person succeeds in committing suicide, then the person's son or friend should be responsible for fine. Despite this condemnation, allowances are also made in certain circumstances in India's Dharma-shastra. For example, a person can commit suicide to compensate for the sin like incest. A person suffering from incurable diseases and unable to perform duties can commit suicide. And we have the sati system. It is also permissible by the Dharma-shastra. And suicide at the holy places such as Varanasi, Prayag, supposed to relieve the soul from never-ending cycle of birth and death. To Durkheim, some suicides are not only seen as a right, but as duty. Some altruistic suicides are obligatory, and some are optional. Altruistic suicide is considered as a motivation, whether it is extol the religious belief or to honor to the husband or to pay homage to some other ideals. For some people, these exceptions give them the right to suicide, yet others see such acts as primitive and as violent rationalization. Today, if one sees suicide from the media perspective, one may find it superficial or mechanical. One may take the example of farmer suicide reported by our media. Media reports suicide to raise awareness about the agrarian distress and thereby hope to force political action in favor of those suffering from state policy, market, uncertainty of agriculture. No doubt, material conditions are important in understanding suicide, but media does not emphasize on suicide as a serious public health concern. Media does not emphasize on suicide as a serious public health concern, which requires a specialized policy response that goes beyond purely economic intervention. In media, there is virtually no public awareness about suicide and its prevention. In almost all articles, individual suicides are treated not as a principal subject but as an example. Moreover, Indian media is also blind to the international norms of suicide reporting. Since media report can lead to imitative suicidal behaviors, media must avoid description of the methods of suicide, and it must not present suicide as a reasonable mechanism, and it must not use suicide as a sensational headline. So if one look at the data on suicide in India, one may find state in south have the higher rate of suicide. Suicide risks are lowest in the North Gangetic Plain. In terms of suicide rate, West Bengal is also considered as the part of South India. So why there is such a variation? To understand it, there is a need to understand the antecedents which causes individual suicide. There are two types of antecedents. First, quarrel with close kins on minor causes including unemployment. And second, unhappy love affairs, suspected relationship, cancelled marriage, and failure in examination. So the first antecedent gives rise to the crisis of human development, and the second antecedent gives rise to the crisis of personal relationship. In Bengal, the crisis of personal relationship is highest. Hence, suicide is highest in the West Bengal. West Bengal as a northern state, the suicide is highest. In the North Gangetic Plain, few suicide happens because of the crisis of human development. In South, the level of human development are high, as are suicide rate. So human development and suicide rate both are high in the South. So in South, we can see female literacy is greatest, female empowerment is relatively highest, women's media consumption is most intense, but at the same time, there is also tension between the expectation of the old social conventions and new romantic values. In North, too few women are literate. Traditional expectations about women's social role are still strong, and their ability to make independent decisions about their lives is limited, but the suicide rate of women is very less in the North. So it is clear that suicide is related with individual, group, and contextual experiences, which is connected with the changing nature of society, especially after liberalization, economic liberalization. Mental health in suicide cannot be denied, but it is a fact that society and culture plays an important role in dictating how people respond to their mental health and suicide. Culture both shapes suicide and contains the protective factor to lessen it. It can push the individual towards and pull them away from the suicide as a solution to their problem. So suicide can be checked if the socio-cultural situation will have both integration and regulation at the moderate level. If there will be no integration, then suicide will be high, or if there is high regulation or the low regulation, then also suicide can also happen. So integration means what? Integration means love, comfort, caring, feeling of belongingness, and regulation means obligation, duties, responsibility, etc. However, following social and cultural factors influence suicide. So, what are those social and cultural factors? We can take the example of family. If the individual is alone, then the possibility of suicide will be higher. If you are having a family, then suicide may not happen. Then the marital status. If you see the Western experience, you will see married people. I think marriage is a protective factor so far as suicide is concerned. But in India, you may find different results in the north and in the south. Right? In the north, women are not that much literate. They are within the traditional social system, and there is no suicide. But here in the south, women are literate. They are, the need for a nuclear family. They want to be away from the traditional social order. And you can see the rate of suicide is also high in the south so far as married women are concerned. Then the parenthood. If you are having children, then you will not commit suicide. Family discord and connectedness. If there is fighting in the family, then the possibility of suicide will be high. If family is connected, if you are related with your distant relatives, then the suicide rate will be low. Social support, it means whether you are part of the peer group or not. And there are also religious affiliation, religious belief, both plays at the protective factor so far as suicide is concerned. Then there are certain economic factors such as occupation, unemployment, socioeconomic status. So all these social and cultural factors, what I have detailed in my paper, they play a very important role while pushing the individual towards suicide or pulling them away from the suicide as the solution to their problem. So culture strongly influences how individuals view suicide. Cultural values and social structure largely determine the type and degree of both stressor and support. Across culture, family cohesion and support acts as a buffer against suicide. Parenthood protects against suicide. Divorce and never married status generally increases suicide risk, especially among men. Social support and various types of religious involvement and belief are protective against suicide. Unemployment and low economic status generally increases suicide risk. Societal wide economic and social changes also influence the incidence of suicide. Social change can create economic hardship, increase family discord, result in migration or separation of families and friends, and further it leads to using of alcohol, and at the last it may end in suicide. So this is what I have done in my paper. Since this is out of my comfort zone, I hope to take your comment and include it in the paper subsequently.